Good afternoon, everybody. I always say a very warm welcome to all of you, and I mean it absolutely 100%. And I also want to welcome Amanda Carr to our Tea Time talk. So it's a bit different this week. We're talking about smell, and we're just talking about the fact that we haven't got anything to actually physically smell. So we're going to have to put it into words, what it means to smell lovely. And I'm sure right at this moment, Amanda, you smell absolutely divine, and and I do too.
Well, I know what you're wearing.
Well, Perfume. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the power, really, of perfume and scent, and the importance of smell, and lots of things that are fascinating and about which I know very little. So I'm going to hand over to you, Amanda. My first question really is to give us a little bit of background and how you became interested in the whole subject of perfume and smell.
Okay, well, thank you firstly for inviting me to do this, Tricia, because I can talk about fragrance all day long, and it's a great honour to come on and talk about it with your audience. So thank you for listening to me. I first got interested in fragrance quite a long time ago. I used to write. I'm a trend forecaster by day job, so I write about trends, or I used to write about trends in fashion. And when fashion started to move into data, sort of around 10 years ago, I lost interest a little bit and wanted to move into a different category. So had my eye on fragrance, because fragrance at that time was quite a strange little part of the beauty floor. It was often quite old-fashioned, and everything was behind a counter. Some brands even locked their fragrances behind counters. So as a sort of retail journalist, if you like, I find that quite an unusual way of approaching how to sell a product. So I got really interested in fragrance, and when I dug a little bit deeper, I found that actually fragrance was undergoing quite a dramatic change. There were a lot of indie brands coming into the arena. A lot of niche fragrance makers and perfumers were starting to change how fragrance was thought of and how it worked. So that's like, I think, when I became hooked. I like fragrance anyway, obviously, but when I saw a part of a category that was in flux and in just about to change, then that really interests me. So using my fragrance background, using my fashion background, sorry, I set up a website called We Wear Perfume, and that looked at fragrance a little bit like you might use a fashion blog. So whereas you might go to something like the Sartorialist and look for inspiration about what people are wearing, we wanted to do the same, but we wanted to know what they were wearing in terms of fragrance, how they were smelling. Because if you look cool, the chances are you probably smell pretty cool too. You'll care about your fragrance. So we set We Wear Perfume up really as a sort of help for people who wanted to perhaps play about with fragrance, or even change their fragrance, but didn't quite know how to go about it. It's never been that easy to buy perfume, and particularly not across brand. I know you love your Chanel, Tricia, but you might, if you go into a Chanel department, they won't let you out. So if they don't sell you fragrance number 5, they might try and sell you number 19 or another fragrance. They won't suggest you go to Dior. So you were never able to really get an idea of what might be perfect for you. So that's been our quest, if you like.
Well, and it's taken you to all sorts of interesting places, hasn't it, in terms of exploring this whole idea. Why do you think that smell is so important to us? Let's sort of give some background to this whole idea of why do we do this thing of spraying ourselves with nice scents?
So how we smell, if we go forward a step and think not just about fragrance, but how we smell, what we inhale actually dictates about 75% of our emotions. So whatever you're inhaling, be it your own house, the sort of building odor of your own house, or maybe a fragrance, or maybe your children's, their hair, whatever it is, it's affecting your mood. Our emotions are almost entirely controlled by how we smell, which I know that sounds crazy, and most people just sort of have to get a double take. I once went on Radio 4 and said that, and I was immediately phoned up by someone from their facts and figures department saying, "Well, are you absolutely sure about these categories?" And so I had to sort of show them where the research was. So it's really tremendous the amount of effect fragrance can have on your emotions. So how we smell, what we smell becomes crucial to our well-being. So we can really help our own well-being by either looking for a fragrance that makes us feel good or anchors us or calms us down. All of those things can affect how we feel. And so fragrance is bigger than just our bottle of scent, if you like.
And then something that's quite interesting in terms of what's been happening with COVID is that it's actually one of those things that has robbed quite a lot of people of their sense of smell and also taste. So tell us a little bit about that, and what happens when we lose those two very, very important senses.
Yeah, so the sense of smell and taste, as you know, is quite a major indicator of COVID-19. And up until COVID, this is going to sound a bit rotten on people who've had COVID, but up until COVID, people really didn't take scent that seriously. Fragrance has always been a bit of a fluffy edge to the beauty world, and in terms of science, it's always been sort of like the ones that have moved to the side a little bit. But suddenly, COVID gave us real heft in terms of how important people who lost their sense of smell and taste were distraught. It changed dramatically how they approached life. You can easily slip into depression if you lose your sense of smell and taste, because it's such a sensual, such a rewarding emotion. It's not just about how you taste, it's also all those little things I refer to, like how your children smell, how your partner smells, how your house smells. All of that is a real emotional pull for you. So if you lose that, you're suddenly adrift. And it's become really exciting. A sort of good side of COVID is that it's been an exciting new area for research. So this year we've seen enormous amounts of money ploughed into fragrance research and scent research to see how our sense of smell can be utilised for emotional uplift, or just for general interest, because you'd be amazed how little we know about the nose.
Absolutely. We were chatting this morning. We watched a film as part of the film club on Michael Hutchence, who was a rock star in excess, and he had this terrible bang to his head and lost his sense of smell and taste, and ultimately committed suicide. And there was quite a lot within that film that implied that as an extremely sensual person, he was devastated by that loss. And you told me this morning that it's quite it's documented that suicide is quite high amongst those people who do lose that critical sense. So my point is that we shouldn't underestimate just how important it is that as you say, we're surrounded by smell all the time, and we connect it to various emotions and situations and stuff. I used to love the smell of my babies, that thing about putting my face into their bedding after I'd got them out. That sounds crazy, but you feel this visceral connection to these little beings that smell so perfect and gorgeous. And you were telling me this morning that babies can recognize their mother's smell.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, all the perfumers I know are so excited about all this extra money they're getting in terms of research, because if you're able to attach particular smells to particular emotions. So for example, I use a lot of frankincense at the moment because frankincense is very grounding, and it's very good for sort of keeping you anchored, and because I have felt quite adrift during the lockdown. It's been difficult to sort of know who you are anymore, and in terms of self-identity, your fragrance can be very important to you. But yes, onto the babies are born with an incredible sense of smell, and they are able to detect the mothers smell very, very fast. So even, you can probably smell your own baby even if you were blindfolded, but your baby would certainly know who you were, because they have such strong connections smell-wise to their parent. And it also helps them breastfeed. So when you're breastfeeding, your nipple is actually giving off an aura of scent. You can't smell it, but the baby can. So it sort of helps it, guides it towards where it's supposed to be for breastfeeding. So there are all sorts of really interesting angles to fragrance and to what we inhale that's still waiting to be discovered. It's an area I find utterly fascinating.
It is fascinating. I think we've established fairly strongly there in that first conversation that smell is a very, very important part of who we are, that it's a very important part of mental health and making us feel good and better and okay. But in fact, perfume and scenting ourselves is actually a different thing, because we're overlaying our natural smell with something that, can come from different sources. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I suppose, well, let's start by talking a little bit about scent and mood, because I think you've got some very interesting things to say about that. And your encouragement, because I think your main thing is to encourage people to experiment, not get stuck in a rut, to try different things. So tell us a little bit about why we should experiment with scent and how it can help us with mood and things like that.
Okay, so I think that talking to an audience of grown-up women and men possibly, I'm not sure, it's very easy for us to get into a bit of a rut on our fragrances. We might have found our signature scent back in the 80s or 70s or whenever, where it was very traditional to have a signature scent. You'd have one fragrance and that would be your self-identity. And now we perhaps find it a little difficult to give that up, because it is such a strong part of our self-identity. If you've been wearing Chanel No. 5 or Diorissimo for all your life, you kind of like, well, that's me. That's how my children recognize me as me. So it's quite hard to break out of it. But I would advise you to, it's never been a better time to practice with fragrance at home, because the online rush for fragrance, once the COVID pandemic set in and we had all our shops closed, fragrance is not very good online, obviously, because you can't smell online. But innovative brands came up with pretty quickly discovery boxes and interactive ways to engage the customer online for fragrance. So I, for example, would advise people to have a little play with the discovery boxes you might find. And this is just one brand I really like. It's called Almond Jane. She's a British perfumer, very elegant, very classic fragrances. And she has this rather lovely little discovery box. So effectively, if you order a discovery box, and they're always reasonably priced, I think they're between sort of 20 and 30 pounds, depending on the brand, but you get a good selection of each of the fragrances, and you can play with them at home. You don't have to worry about, a scary beauty consultant hovering over your shoulder with a spray bottle. You can take this home. Quite often, brands will now have some sort of interactive Zoom talk, a little bit like we're doing now, where you can perhaps talk with somebody to understand a little bit more about the fragrance. But really, everything's in here. And you can slowly go through, it's all about sort of slow scenting. You can slowly test this at home, in your own space, in your own time, and really feel how those fragrances make you feel. We've often been wearing fragrance in order to impress other people. How do we smell for other people? How do I impress somebody, or smell sexy, or smell, important, or whatever? The trend now is very much about scenting for ourselves, trying to find a fragrance that actually makes you feel good. You don't have to worry about anybody else. You're feeling what makes you feel good. And discovery boxes are having a bit of a moment. So I would encourage everybody to have a little rummage around, and we can put some, I don't know if we can put some links up to some suggestions, but there are quite a few really good discovery boxes that allow you to really experiment with the different types of fragrances you may or may not like. And as you say, Tricia, it's just like makeup. Be playful. If you don't like it, you can wash it off. It's not a big thing, but you can be a lot more playful and a lot more adventurous with the discovery box at home, I think, anyway.
Am I also right in saying that scents react differently on different people? So something on you might smell quite differently on me. So
yeah,
that's true.
It is absolutely true. And when I describe this to people or explain it to people, I try and link it to food. So anchovies taste the same. An anchovy is an anchovy. Some people love anchovies. Some people just cannot stand them. And fragrance is a little bit like that. Fragrance will not necessarily smell different on people, but your nose will make it smell different. So the base product is the same, but how you're smelling it and how I'm smelling it will be different. And so consequently, that what happens is that manifests as it smelling different on other people. Having said that, fragrance can definitely smell different on different skin types. So if you have very sort of rich, oily skin, fragrance hangs about a long time, and you'll probably find you can wear fragrance and it lasts for a long time. If you've got sort of pale, dry skin, fragrance disappears super fast because the fragrance molecules need to hang on to a fat molecule. So we always advise people to really moisturize your skin before you spray fragrance, and it lasts a lot longer. So yes, it does smell different because your nose is making it smell different, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, yes, and thanks for clarifying that. I mean, two things have occurred to me while you've been talking. One is that you said about wearing scent for yourself. So you're not wearing it to impress somebody else, but you're wearing it for your own pleasure. And I'm connecting that to the fact that I've sprayed perfume on myself every day for the last year, despite the fact that I've had very few people anywhere near enough to me to actually smell me. and I think for me, it's been part of my sort of mental health in a way, in a strange way, because it's just been about making myself feel better. And a spritz of perfume is one of the ways that I would normally behave, so therefore continue to normalize my the behavior, even though I'm in this very strange situation of not meeting anybody. I want to ask you about some tips on wearing it, because I think that's another aspect that nobody's ever told me what to do with perfume. So my approach tends to be to spritz quite a lot into the air and walk into it. So yeah. I have no idea whether that's a good idea or not. Tell me, what's the best way to get the most out of what is basically quite an expensive thing?
Yes, this is really fun. Our fragrancing rituals are so different, particularly between cultures. And on our We Wear Perfume website, we interview a lot of people about how and what they spray. Do we all spray our necks, or are people just spraying different things? And so that's very interesting, particularly the perfumers who end up spraying all sorts of different areas of themselves to make them feel good. So let's go over your having a scent cloud and walking through it. That's absolutely fine. And what will happen there is probably because you're directing the scent into the air, it probably will hang around your hair a lot more. So you'll walk into it and it won't just stick to your skin, it'll stick to your hair. And your hair is actually very porous and holds onto fragrance for quite a long time. And if you don't have too much problem with dry hair, scenting your hair can actually be a really nice way to hold fragrance for a long time. And when you swoosh, you get that lovely sort of sillage that comes off it. Obviously, some people have very dry hair and that doesn't work. And in fact, I've got one here. Quite a lot of fragrance brands are now bringing out hair mists, which are much, much lighter, made it with water rather than alcohol. This is a Miller Harris one called Scherzo. And that's a really nice new ritual that sort of people are getting into now, which is a lighter way to fragrance. And what will happen with your scent cloud, Tricia, is you'll have sprayed quite a lot of your fragrance into the air and it will simply fall onto the floor, but you'll have a lighter application, which is quite nice. One absolute no-no is to spray your wrists and then rub them together. because what you're doing there is you're heating up your fragrance molecules, which are poofing off really fast, and you don't want that. So spray your wrists, but don't rub them, because otherwise you're wearing the perfume out much too quickly. Another tip for making sure you still smell your own fragrance is to spray the back of your neck. Quite often we'll spray the front of our neck. And what happens there is the nose will register it as a smell until it recognizes it and knows it's a safe smell, and it switches off. So you're still smelling it subliminally. Your brain is still registering it, even though you can't recognize it. But it switches off because it knows it doesn't have to worry. It's not a fight or flight smell. It's not dangerous. It knows what it is. If you spray the back of your neck rather than the front, your nose doesn't pick it up quite so much. It'll only pick it up when you move to the side. So you'll still have that same sort of aura for everybody else. For your own nose, you slightly trick it into thinking that it's not there all the time. So if you want to smell your fragrance, that's quite a fun way to do it. And we also recommend, if you've got allergies, a lot of people are very nervous about fragrance on their skin, and spraying your clothes is a great way to make that a little safer for allergy wearers, because spraying a scarf or spraying the inside of a jacket or an inside of a coat or even the inside of a hat can be a really nice emotional engagement with your clothing and with that sense of smell. So if you have a sort of favorite winter coat, if you pick a particularly cozy smell for the inside of it and you spray it inside the coat, you have this sort of lovely emotional wrap when you put it on. You think, oh yeah, okay, this is the winter, this coat's really cozy and warm, I'm well protected, and off I go. It's a sort of new way of making a ritual out of wearing fragrance. It's not just a spritz and forget. You can apply it to some quite interesting places to make the ritual a little bit more fun.
Are we supposed to be spraying it on pulse points? Is that
yes, that's
point
the
of wrist and places like that?
That's the general sort of consensus, because of course through the pulse points the blood is pumping quite fast and it's thinner on the skin, so you're actually going to get that warmth of the pulse will help the fragrance radiate. So that's where that comes from. It's just effectively warming the fragrance so it moves on. Just going back to when we interview perfumers, some of the French women perfumers we interview spray the backs of their knees because there's a nice warm pulse point there. And I'm not sure why that would be important, but they kind of like the idea that they can sort of walk along and leave the sillage of fragrance at a different level rather than just being up here. It's down there too. So that's kind of fun.
I think the French are a law unto themselves, even in where they put their perfume.
It's fun.
Okay, tell us a bit more about the connection between particular scents and the kind of mood that they create. And if I can't sleep, for instance, are there scents that are good for that?
Yeah.
You talked about frankincense at the moment being a good one. So tell us about the connection between.
So lots of work at the moment is being done towards aromatherapy, which is where a little bit different from, so we've all heard of essential oils and how those can, with aromatherapy, how those can enrich our emotional or our physical state. We can feel much better. This is slightly different. Aromatherapy is where the actual brain can be reported as being, or researched as being, changed through what you inhale. And actually perfume houses have had this technology for a very long time. They use it quietly behind the scenes to see if a fragrance is going to make somebody feel happy or whatever, or calm or whatever. Now, because of a lot of the millennials and Gen Zs having high levels of anxiety, the beauty industry has been trying to soothe that through beauty. So there's been a lot of sort of anxiety for beauty rituals changed and improved. And we're seeing it come through in fragrance. And of course, fragrance uses essential oils. So now we're seeing a lot of work where active ingredients within fragrance are are the main story of the fragrance. So whereas before we might have been buying fragrance because it was a beautiful bouquet of flowers, now we're buying it because it contains mint, and mint has a real uplift on the brain. It can stimulate the brain. You don't have to use me to tell you this. You inhale, a bunch of mint, it has an amazing effect on you. A euphoric opening of the nose, opening of the blood vessels, and a lift in your sort of head. Exactly that happens when you use mint in a fragrance. It has this aromatherapy effect where it really changes how you feel. We've been burning a lot of rosemary here because rosemary has a very good, it's been proved to make you concentrate more. So if you are burning rosemary in a room, for example, or using rosemary essential oil, it'll help your concentration. So if you're working from home, that might be a good one to know. And if you're we've had a real problem, haven't we, with sleep during the pandemic. A lot of people have really struggled. And so there's been a lot of research, obviously, on things like lavender, which is, as many people will know, is a really good soothing fragrance. But other fragrances like chamomile, and there's a ylang ylang also has an incredibly relaxing effect too. So by buying your fragrance according to whatever the actives are in it, you might find that you'll be buying fragrance for a different reason, to make you sleep or keep you happy or whatever.
I mean, this feels like almost from medieval times,
Yes.
the thicket gardens and all these things that people then knew an enormous amount about this stuff, didn't they?
And it's really funny to mention that, yeah, because that's what a lot of the fragrance houses, the big guys behind the fragrance brands, are actually re-establishing their apothecary type practices. And we're seeing people go back to those old methods and using fragrant oils, for example. We used to use a lot of fragrant oils, and we even used to ingest. The first fragrances were ingested. You used to, you absorbed a cologne, you bought a cologne to drink. Don't try this at home, by the way. But that's how fragrances first started off. So very much so, Tricia, you're bang on there. Well done.
I just not long ago read the book Hamlet by Maggie O'Farrell, and in it, she proposes the notion that Shakespeare's wife, although she was uneducated and couldn't read or write, she was known in the area for her herbs and her physic garden and her cures and remedies and so on. And it feels like, so things like rosemary, chamomile, we've known about those for a long time, haven't we?
Yeah.
And it's true to say that there's nothing new in the zoo almost. We've just come back.
Yeah.
To what was basically folk knowledge in the past about what beautiful smells, how they helped us, and so on and so forth. So do you constantly change your scent? Are you constantly experimenting with scent? How do you approach it?
I often smell really strange because I can't swivel my room around because it's too untidy. But I've got fragrances laid out everywhere. I smell up to about 4 on my skin at once if I'm testing fragrances. I can test up to 4 at once, but often I'll smell a bit odd because of that. And also I fall in love with different fragrances all the time because there are so many beautiful ones coming out all the time that I find it quite hard to resist a fragrance, and I change quite a lot. Although I think what you'll find is you'll have a particular type of fragrance that you really like. So I really like ambers, warm, spicy scents. And I think if you like that, that's the playground in which you probably want to practice first of all. Or if you like a citrus fragrance, for example, a lovely bright lemony orangey citrus, have a play around with all the other sort of citruses and see if there's anything else you might like there. There's a really nice, I've got a couple of things I was going to show you. There's a really nice discovery. This is a subscription set, so a little bit of a different market, but again, this was innovation that came out during COVID. There's a company called You, and they take you a bit more seriously. So as grown-up women, I think this is quite nice because we don't fall for that marketing campaign stuff about standing up and being towed along by lions or whatever. It all seems a bit daft to us, I think. So this is quite nice because it's a bit more serious, and every 2 months they'll send you, I don't know if you can see, but there's 3 10 ml fragrances that are completely unique, created by perfumers. So you get a connection to the person who's actually made it, a little bit like a chef, how they've come up with it and what they like. They've taken different ingredients and they've done something really beautiful. And you get to wear those 3 for the month. So you have a little atomizer and you can then practice with those. So if you're really wanting to take it a little more seriously and to find out a bit more about fragrance, a little bit like you might do with wine, it's a very similar sort of process, only much less complicated. But it's just, I thought this was quite a nice way of doing it, really. It's quite reasonably priced. And you just, again, you do it slowly at home. You can test it out on yourself or other people. And it just seems a nice way, I think, to wear it. So I was quite impressed with that new ritual, to do that.
If you liked one of those, I would say you really liked one of those, could you get more of it?
Yeah, so you can get if you particularly liked one of them, you can then buy a 100 ml bottle, and they will be holding those in stock, I presume, until they run out. The idea is a little bit that it's experimental and you try lots of different things, but yeah, I think they'll have the 100 mils for quite a while, I would have thought.
I'm assuming that you've got a very well honed nose. A bit, because I say that because you're talking about all these subtle differences, and I just feel like mine would be an extremely blunt approach, let's put it that way. I wouldn't have very much refinement. So have you just educated yourself over a fairly long period of time, or have you always loved being able to define specific smells in something, because oh, I can smell rosemary in that,
I actually try really hard to be a consumer always. So I'm not trying to be, although obviously I'm learning, and yes, I'm definitely better. Our sense of smell is a muscle. So the more you use it, the better you will get. And over at something called the Perfume Society, I don't know if any of you keen perfumers might know about it, run by Jo Fairley. She recommends you try to smell 4 things every morning and write down what they smell like. So you might take a lemon, for example, rather than 4. Let's say you take 1 thing a day, a lemon, an orange, a pear. You smell it and you write down 4 things that it reminds you of. And it just is you developing your sense of smell. It's a muscle. You can improve it. The more interest you take in what you're smelling, the more you're going to smell. So I don't think I have a particularly, I'm certainly not, I'm not good enough to be a perfumer or a nose. And I'm always trying to come at it from a consumer's point of view, because it's all about buying something that smells good to you. You don't want it to be intimidating. You want fragrance to be open to everybody and great fun and playful and easy, and something that everyone wants to do. Fragrance has suffered a little bit from being intimidating in the past and slightly snobbish, particularly in some shops. So one of the things we wanted to do, and we were perfumers, to sort of break that down and go, no, have fun. It's just, if you don't like it, wash it off. It's not a great big thing.
I think that's absolutely right. That's quite a good way to round off our conversation, really, because I think that's exactly right. I associate perfume with expense, France, quite snooty shops like Harrods or Selfridges, places that are a bit or in the past anyway, definitely austere and intimidating, to the extent that I feel it's a club I don't really belong to, because I haven't got a nose. I haven't got that highly refined sense of smell. I love what you just said there about taking the time and trouble to smell something as simple as a lemon or a pear or whatever, and really, really noticing what it is and perhaps how it makes us feel. I mean, I love that idea, and I'm going to do that. That's something I'm going to do. I think it's an important thing to develop, and I like the idea of developing that. So I'm going to come to Bryony now and ask you, Bryony, what questions you've got for Amanda.
Yes, we have had a few questions. So Amanda, first one is from Sue. She said that she loves the smell of vanilla, but it does seem to be unpopular in perfume. Why is this?
Oh, I love vanilla. I think vanilla is is an anchor for many fragrances. So Sue, you're definitely onto a winner. It's a great ingredient for fragrance. What's happened in the last few years is vanilla has been used in a very sweet way. So there's a fragrance family called a gourmand family, which is a mixture of sort of spicy vanilla and very heavy sweet notes, so like candy floss notes. And those have been very popular with young people, and they're quite sickly. So I think for grown-up women who might have been brought up on slightly more sophisticated, what I'd call sort of chic type fragrances, the sort of the fragrances of the 70s and 80s, where they were very sort of old school, this new gourmand collection feels a little bit sweet, a little bit almost tacky. I don't like using that word too much, because if you like a sweet fragrance, then that's great. But I don't know if anyone knows Angel from Alien, for a Mugler fragrance. It's a very sweet candy floss type note that often uses vanilla. So vanilla might have had a bit of a bad rap when it's linked into that gourmand family, but generally vanilla is a wonderful fragrance ingredient to use in fragrance. It's an anchor note. It's often right at the bottom, so maybe an hour or so after you sprayed it, you'll be able to smell the vanilla on the bottom still. It's a lovely note. I'm a big fan.
Perfect. And then another question. So a different Sue has said, I adore perfume, but do find that the smell doesn't seem to last. Have you got any suggestions?
Yes, good question. Fragrance definitely sticks better to hydrated skin. So as I said earlier, if you moisturize where you spray your fragrance first, you'll get a much better last. And if you can afford it, it's a special treat. Buy the body lotion from the fragrance brand you like, because those are often really good ways of wearing fragrance. They stick a whole load of fragrance oil in those body lotions, and they're a good way of just lightly scenting yourself, is just to use those. But if you layer on your fragrance over those, then you get a super hit, and it's a nice long-lasting way. I don't know if it would be helpful to know about eau de toilette versus eau de parfum. Eau de toilette is you'll see a lot of fragrance houses selling eau de toilette. Jo Malone, for example, a big, very popular fragrance house, they mostly make eau de toilettes, and it's a light way of wearing a fragrance. It's got about 10% fragrance oil to the rest is alcohol. So it'll last you about an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then it'll disappear. If you use an eau de parfum, which is often twice as strong, so up to about 20% fragrance oil to alcohol, that will last you much longer. It's often a little bit more expensive to buy, but actually it's better value for money, because the fragrance will last on your skin for longer, because there's more fragrance oil in there, and it's a more powerful way of wearing it. So I would say if you're having a problem, Sue, try and check out if you've got an eau de toilette or an eau de parfum. And if you've got an eau de toilette, consider the slightly stronger collections and see if that works.
That's perfect, thank you. Another question, does perfume go off at all?
It certainly does, yes. So big rules for fragrance: keep it out of sunlight, which I've got going on over here. I've got loads of bottles here that are being contaminated as we speak, but keep fragrance out of sunlight, keep it out of temperature changes. So it just needs to be consistent. Usually cool is better. Some people keep their fragrance in the fridge. I don't, but I don't keep it in the bathroom either, because you go from hot to cold in the bathroom, and that's not good for it. So stable conditions. I always keep my fragrances in their boxes, which I know is a bit of a bore, but it lasts for longer in the boxes. Now, if your fragrance if you think it smells funny and it's turned, this won't work for everybody, but turned fragrances, often it's the top notes that have turned, those first effervescent fizzy notes that come off and smell amazing when you spray the fragrance first of all. If you can bear it, spray the fragrance on you, the turned fragrance on you, leave it for 5 or 10 minutes, and then smell it again. And what you might find is that it's okay. It's just those top notes that have gone off. and then the middle notes and the base notes are actually holding on fine. I appreciate that makes you might smell strange for 10 minutes, so do it, you know, in the privacy of your own home. But rather than throw the fragrance away, you might find that actually you can wear it. It may also have gone off completely, in which case I'm afraid it's a no-no, and you'll just have to use it for room spray or, you know, in the bathroom somewhere. But yeah.
That's great, some great top tips there. And then just one final question from Sue. She's wondering how long the process is to create a perfume.
Oh, good question, yes. On average, it takes about 18 months to 2 years to create a fragrance. Here's something interesting that you might not know. Fragrance gets left in its bottles to mature. So if you make a fragrance, let's say we were making a fragrance today and we came up with a really nice smelling fragrance, we would have to leave it a month before it actually was its true self, because fragrance, a little bit like wine, changes when it's all mixed together. So fragrances are often going backwards and forwards between a perfumer and a lab to mix up, and the time comes because they have to wait so long between each change to make sure it smells good after a month. So I didn't know that before I started writing about fragrance, and I thought that was really interesting. You just imagine everyone's mixing it all up and then shipping it out, but it's not quite like that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. I'll hand back to Tricia now.
Thank you very much indeed, Bryony. So I just want to say thank you to Amanda. That was absolutely wonderful. Really enjoyed that. If you want to find Amanda, look on Instagram under We Wear Perfume. Follow her on Instagram, because I think it's there, isn't it, Amanda, that you put a lot of information and all the information about things like discovery boxes and so on. So if you are interested in exploring it further, you feel you're in a bit of a rut and you would like to get out of that rut and discover some more and interesting perfumes, then following Amanda on We Wear Perfume is a good way to do that. So so do take a look at that. And I just want to say thank you so much. Somebody underneath just wrote that was a really fascinating session, and it was. I enjoyed it a lot. It certainly opened my mind to a lot of things that I was unaware of, and although I'm not sure I'm going to go far from my lovely Chanel No. 5 mist that I walk through every morning. I now know an awful lot more, and I'm certainly going to get into the habit of smelling those ordinary things like lemons and so on, because I can see that that's an important way to develop this fifth sense that we have of smell. So Amanda, that was delightful. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to everybody who joined us, and I'll see you all again very soon. So bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody.